Microsoft is quite literally holding itself back. Now, I am by no means the first one to discuss this topic. It's been heavily covered by media outlets and other YouTubers already, but in an ocean of crappy business practices and scummy corporate decisions, I think it's important to highlight the choice that Microsoft has made and its ultimately beneficial results for end users. However, as with most things in the gaming industry, it's a double-edged sword, because what is beneficial for consumers in this particular instance might not be so beneficial for certain developers. Effectively, Microsoft has decided that there will be no exclusive releases for the Series X console for a lengthy period of time after its initial launch. The idea is that the games will play up and down the family of devices, meaning when the new console hits, rather than having games confined strictly to it as an isolated platform, releases will still be compatible with regular Xbox One consoles as well. For reference, the exact quote from Xbox Game Studios head, Matt Booty, reads as follows: "As our content comes out over the next year, 2 years, all of our games, sort of like PC, will play up and down that family of devices. We want to make sure that if someone invests in Xbox between now and Series X, that they feel that they made a good investment and that we're committed to them with content." He also goes on to say that their commitments are to 1. Deliver on the promises that we make, 2. Make sure that we hold the bar high on quality and that we're releasing games that we can be proud of and that the fans can be proud of as Xbox exclusives, and 3, much more importantly than the previous two, continue building characters, stories, and worlds that can transcend generations, devices, and platforms. Now, among the coverage, there are, of course, the grabby clickbait headlines, good job IGN, quality work there as always, that make it seem as if there will be a blanket lack of exclusive titles altogether. Clever title, idiots. But the truth is that there will still be Microsoft exclusives, it's just that these exclusives will be backwards compatible, and also, as Microsoft have made very clear, cross-compatible with PC. Essentially, Microsoft have done away with the concept of exclusives, if we consider the traditional definition, and this decision further entrenches that idea. My first impression was one of skepticism. My immediate concern was that requiring backwards compatibility means hard-locking games to the limitations of, by the words of a developer friend I discussed the issue with, 2013 laptop hardware. The regular Xbox One consoles are nearing the end of their organic life cycle, and the hardware has progressed tremendously since they were initially launched. The decision to make games backwards compatible means greater strain on the development team, and I cannot say exactly how that entire process will work, but it's not as simplistic as some may assume. However, as I began evaluating the issue further, I started to realize that from a broader consumer perspective, this self-imposed throttle check on Microsoft's own technology uptake is unbelievably valuable to average users. I'll use myself as an example here. Right now, next to my monitor, there is an Xbox One S. This is a console I've been using for years, and while I do technically have the ability to purchase whatever console is released, I am fortunate enough to have the resources to do so, but more importantly, I can write it off as a business purchase for a deduction, etc. I have absolutely no intention of doing so at this time. I am a firm believer in the concept of if it isn't broken, don't fix it. My setup works, my console works, it gets the job done, and ignoring the fact that I could purchase a new generation of hardware should it be necessary, a lot of gamers have a similar mindset while lacking that comparative option. With that in mind, the idea that new Microsoft exclusives will be backwards compatible means that for a lengthy period of time, the existing hardware that players have will remain relevant, and stave off the inevitable obsolescence which is always advancing. This is a very good thing, a very consumer-friendly thing, and a decision that Microsoft should be commended for. Now, I'll discuss how this decision is impacting developers in just a minute, because that is the second edge of the knife, but since most of my channel right now tackles consumer advocacy and player value, this is something worth praising. Historically, console exclusives, more specifically generational exclusives, were used to help force adoption of the new model, sort of the same way platform exclusives like God of War, for example, are sold as an independent unit, but also used as an incentive and tool to sell PlayStation consoles as well. With Microsoft and the new Xbox Series X, they could easily leverage a high-profile release like the upcoming Halo game to try and spur increased sales of the new console itself, not just profit from the game. This kind of practice was the previous norm. It has happened with every single console I have ever paid any attention to, not just from Microsoft, but also from Sony. The motivation is simple, and it's something we can see taken to an absolute extreme by companies like Apple. Make new hardware, make old hardware obsolete, not only sell new products, but sell new products that force adoption of the new hardware, and you can double dip in the consumer's pockets and make much more money. This is actually something I fully expected from the new console generation as well. I wasn't thinking about it consciously like, oh, I can't wait for them to sell exclusives that prioritize new hardware. That will be fun, but that's just sort of how it is. So when I did finally learn that Microsoft would be self-moderating that practice, increasing and lengthening the lifespan of the existing console hardware and prioritizing consumer value, I was very pleasantly surprised. However, now I want to discuss from a developmental perspective how the decision is not universally appreciated. I cannot pretend to understand what all of the terms mean exactly, but when discussing the issue with a prominent development figure I've gotten to know quite well over previous years, they explained a bit more about why they are less than enthused when I asked specifically why and how this decision was unappealing. There were terms like large-scale physics and destructible environment design, better AI protocols, even things like speech synthesis, and a whole lot more technical stuff I'm really not qualified to dissect right now. But the prevailing concern was that it would now be a few more years before some of these extremely interesting and cutting-edge development tools could be fully utilized for certain teams and projects. At first, I admittedly didn't really see the point. Why does it matter? But then I started to understand better because third-party developers will almost always attempt to access the largest possible market. Restricting your audience reach to a small fraction of users who purchase the new console generation isn't exactly desirable for a lot of studios. But knowing that third-party companies will likely be already prioritizing backwards compatibility, Microsoft doing so for in-house exclusives in addition to that means that there really won't be any projects specifically designed to show off what the new Series X can do. Something like Halo Infinite could really truly shine brighter with all efforts put towards the new platform. Now, on a somewhat related note, maybe that's a good thing that this practice isn't happening. An example that comes to mind is Order 1886 and the mere 6-hour campaign that was basically just a flashy visual demo for the new console generation back when the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 were launched. It was a $60 game, and in my opinion, it truly did not deserve to exist in that capacity, but the motivation was pretty clear. Use the new tools and make something amazing to showcase them. Knowing that a similar release will not occur, similar to that of Order 1886, seems like a good thing, but the concern of having to wait for advancement is undeniably frustrating, not just for certain developers, but also for those who really prioritize that aspect of their gaming experience. I am not one of those people. Frames per second and visual fidelity isn't my primary concern, like, not ever, but for some players that means a lot, and Microsoft effectively committing to backwards compatibility can very well mean that games will not fully capitalize on the new tools, which could be unappealing to some players. Then again, with Microsoft now committing to PC releases and backing away from the traditional definition of exclusivity, it opens the door for those who really care about hardware advancements to play on a platform that excels beyond what consoles ever could be. Like I said, I'm having a hard time finding a disagreement here with what Microsoft has done. I spend a lot of time criticizing large companies and their seemingly normal decision-making process nowadays because that process often screws over average consumers, or at the very least screws over a large section of those average consumers by preying on a specifically vulnerable subset of their peers. However, Microsoft and the Game Pass initiative, which shows exceptional value, even though I still remain skeptical of subscription-based ownership models, combined with the backwards compatibility push, which makes it clear that regular console purchases between now and the Series X release will not have the rug pulled out from under them, make it very hard not to appreciate the decision that they have made to hold themselves back. This decision does not appear to be emulated by Sony for the PlayStation 5. It's unclear what exact titles will be exclusive on launch day, but rumors of there being confirmed exclusivity for certain games targeted at the new generation of the PlayStation console are becoming somewhat common. It's possible that a third party will swoop in to create something exceptional with the new hardware in mind, specifically for the Xbox Series X, but personally I find it to be rather unlikely, and if it does happen, it certainly won't be frequent for quite some time. However, weighing the downside against the upside, Microsoft is holding themselves back for the benefit of the consumer, and I can appreciate that fact. That's not to say that they don't benefit as well, let's get that straight right now. Console sales usually fall off a cliff in the lead up to a new generation. No one wants to buy something the month before it basically gets replaced, at least that was the previous format. With this new decision, Microsoft is committing to the old generation remaining relevant and having a significant overlap with the new hardware, which means they construct a much more cohesive brand of products. It remains to be seen how all of this will go, but I find myself remaining somewhat optimistic about the process. Like I said, I don't plan to replace my perfectly viable Xbox One S until I actually have to, and Microsoft just basically committed to another 2 years of viability. It's hard for me to complain about that. Overall, I have my gripes with Microsoft and I am nervous about the future of high-profile AAA gaming in its entirety, but these types of consumer-friendly decisions are a breath of fresh air, and I hope the atmosphere continues to develop. But that's it for today, though. If you want to support, there are links down below: merch, Patreon, Twitter, and other social media, etc. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.